Welcome. My name is Francisco Guevara. I'm co-executive director of Architopia Foundation, and I will be your moderator today. Today, we are hosting panel discussion number 3, Local Knowledge, Dignity, Solidarity, Sustainability, and Social Justice. We want to welcome our panelists, Tony EVANKO from Casa Patios, Dr. Jeffreen Hayes, Mami KATSUYA from Kyoto Art Center, Liudmyla NYCHAI from Nazar Voitovich Art Residence, and Shih from Instinc Art Space. Today, we're going to be focusing on the theme, as I mentioned, of local knowledge. And what we have thought of in terms of the discussion, I wrote in a short paragraph that I'm going to read for you guys. So, violence, oppression, and even colonization can be interpreted as pure and simple domination. Especially considering that contestation and resistance has always been a counter reaction that has continuously allowed communities to transform themselves. Boaventura de Sousa Santos explains that the power of communities reside in the construction and validation of knowledge born in struggle, of ways of knowing, developed by social groups as part of their social resistance against systematic injustice and oppression caused by capitalism, colonialism, and patriarchy. In that sense, artist residencies around the globe and the multiplicity of their models have allowed them to effectively adapt to the local artistic and cultural needs while gaining traction to impact the development of artistic discourses at a global scale. In the face of uncertainty, it is urgent to continue critical discussions and radical experimentation. More than ever, concepts such as dignity, solidarity, sustainability, and social justice are relevant to the practice of artist residencies. And the goal of this panel is to contextualize the process of colonization, coloniality, Eurocentrism, and also to understand how it is invested in place in inventing the idea of a destination and place itself. However, one of the goals that we had for this panel is to rethink how do we survive, because it's not as simple as saying something, someone, or a place was colonized. It is a process that is highly complex, and in that sense, there's always resistance, and there has always been resistance since the beginning of the process of colonization, probably 500 years ago. So the idea of the panel is to focus in ways of knowing. This idea of understanding how local knowledge that might not be written, that might be oral, that might be part of our community's histories, are actually rooted in specific epistemologies to understand how we see the world, how we interact with each other, how we help ourselves to survive. So the questions that we want to ask today are about dignity, solidarity, sustainability, and social justice among residency, the residency field, but also specifically within our programs and in relation to our communities. One of the questions that I want us to think about, and of course it's an open-ended question, is how residencies have become this space that is in between private and public, and therefore the question of knowledge is always relevant to us. So another question that I want to ask is also what have we learned locally that could be implemented interculturally and transnationally? And what are the kinds of struggles in our organizations and what that are we facing? And these ways of knowing have produced specific possibilities to survive. So now I want to formally introduce each one of our panelists. First, Tony EVANKO. Tony EVANKO is an idealist, dreamer, and planner with experience in organizing and executing large-scale projects involving multiple actors to achieve extraordinary results. As an artist and architect, his insatiable curiosity, creative and drive for professionalism have enabled Fundación Casa Patios to evolve from a strictly art-based organization to an organization that strives to take full advantage of the potential of contemporary artistic practices in the transformation of society through its educational, artistic, and research programs. Since 2006, he has erected the foundation and has been the driving force behind these programs. He teaches and advises art students in the University of Antioquia and has been part-time professor in the National University of Colombia, the University Foundation for Fine Arts, and the University of New Mexico. These experiences have enabled him to forge important alliances with the academic community both in Colombia and abroad. He frequently lectures about art and education, socially based artistic practices, and self-organized cultural initiatives. He mentors young arts organizations in their development and has participated as a member of the Arts Council of Medellin in the area of new media. We also want to welcome Dr. Jeffreen Hayes. Uh, Jeffreen Hayes merges her curatorial practice into her cultural leadership of supporting artists as an advocate for racial inclusion, equity, and access. She creates approaches for community participation, particularly for those in underrepresented groups. Her curatorial project includes Silos, Augusta Savage, Renaissance Woman, Africobra, Message to the People, Africobra, Nation Time, and Embracing the Lens, the Black Florida Project. As the executive director of Three Walls, Jeffreen provides strategic vision for the artistic direction and impact of the organization in Chicago. Under her leadership, Three Walls works with artists to help manifest the organization's visions of art connecting segregated communities, people, and experience together. We also want to welcome Mami KATSUYA. Mami KATSUYA is program director of Kyoto Art Center. She graduated from Hiroshima City University. She had been an artist in residence coordinator of Kyoto Art Center, a curator of NYCHAI Kodokan Foundation before she had her current position. Katsuya is interested in dynamism of artistic activities in the global world and working for artists in residence program and visual art programs at Kyoto Art Center. She has engaged with many international projects such as the Instrument Builders Project, Circulating Echo, Culture City of East Asia 2017, Felderstack International, and she recently coordinated the International Conference Res Artist Meeting 2019, Kyoto Creative Encounters, Reimagining Residencies in collaboration with Res Artist Foundation. She's a member of the committee of Higashima Artist Placement Services. We also want to welcome Liudmyla NYCHAI. Liudmyla is co-founder and general coordinator of NGO Congress of Cultural Activists, the organization founded after the Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine in 2014 as a platform for art managers and artists for change in the cultural field. From 2015, started to develop the art mobility of Ukraine movement. She's one of the first researchers who started to study theory and practices of art residencies in the Ukraine. In 2017, founded the project Nazar Voitovich Art Residence, created for two different meanings for the commemoration of the Revolution of Dignity and supporting young artists in a process of implementation of best international practices of artist residencies. From 2018, she has been the local curator of Ukrainian projects in Lighthouse Gallery, Berlin, in Germany. And last but not least, we want to welcome Shin Yoon Yeo. She graduated from the National University of Singapore in 1998 with a bachelor degree in business administration. She then joined La Salle College of the Arts and completed a diploma in communication design in 2001 prior to her pursuit of the baccalaureate program in painting at the San Francisco Art Institute in 2002. Professionally, Yeo is known to reinterpret the very act of ink uh, painting with striking results. Her experimentations with the fusion of the traditional form and contemporary mediums, such as new media of performance art, have garnered much acclaim, uh, including a commission by the Singapore Art Museum and the recognition of the Sovereign Asia Art Prize People's Choice Award in 2012. We want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us in this panel. The structure of the panel is going to be divided in a 10-minute presentation for each one of you, and we will begin in the order as I presented you. As I mentioned, you will have 10 minutes to present your ideas, and we will let you know 2 minutes before the end of your time. And of course, this is flexible, so we want you to enjoy the conversation and also to expand it. And later on, we will think about the different questions. I will be taking notes as we present all of our programs. And in the end, we'll open the discussion for everyone to join in. Okay. So first, we would like to begin with Tony EVANKO.
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Francisco and Nayeli, for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to meet all the other invitees. I'm very anxious to see all of their projects and hear about their thoughts about the topics. I'm going to give, first of all, a little bit of a background for Casa de Patios, and a little bit of the sort of to reinforce and a little bit the discourse that Francisco gave us earlier with respect to colonialism and in context. So I'm going to switch to the presentation mode. So, Casa Tres Patios was founded in 2006, basically as a experimental space, a space that was dedicated, as Francisco mentioned, to the arts community in Medellin. At that time, there weren't very many residencies. There were 3 in 2006, none of which exist today. And we just basically started as a sort of a experiment, like as I said, an experimental space. And we did local artist residencies, which I'll show in a little bit in a minute. But first, I want to talk about the mission of Casa Tres Patios as it's evolved today. So now we consider Casa Tres Patios to be a center for contemporary thought dedicated to promoting social justice through research, education, and artistic practice. This is a mission that we've kind of arrived at over the years. Basically while working with the artistic community, but with the community in general. And a little bit of background about Colombia for those of you that aren't really familiar with it, in terms of the context and the needs of the local community with respect to the question about dignity and solidarity and social justice, because it's important, I think, to understand that in countries like Colombia, in which the inequality is so high, it's the second most unequal country in Latin America. And the question of social justice, which, as we know, is really based on the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. This kind of inequality is implicit in the topic of lack of social justice within the country. And to give a little bit of an idea of the context of Colombia, probably most of you are familiar with some of the history of Colombia, particularly in the last 50 years. But it's important to understand that not only the colonization process, because many of the countries in the world have been colonized, but there are not so many of the formerly colonized countries that have had a history so rife with conflict. Since the beginning of the country, that's been in conflict basically 85 years out of the 197 years of its history since independence. So this history of violence in the country has left a legacy of a society that is based on mistrust and corruption and the normalization of criminality. And this is a very sort of pessimistic and cynical kind of viewpoint, I realize, but the more that we work within the community, the more we see the effects of this kind of dynamic in our practice. And paradoxically, you probably have realized or probably know that in 2016, there was a peace agreement signed with the rebel organization, the FARC. But actually, since then, the violence in the countryside and the rural areas has increased because of the vacuum left by the power structure that the FARC implemented in those areas. So I just wanted to set this kind of scenario for you so that we could begin to understand a little bit with the context in which we work. Like I said, in 2006, we began as an experimental space in a gathering space. We did local artist residencies. We invited artists to come and just use the spaces in the house to do experiments and projects that they hadn't really had the opportunity to do before. Then in 2007 and 2012, we began to change our opinion or form of working. We started to implement international artist residencies. And as a way to activate the community with the artist residencies, at one point, we began to obligate the artists to do workshops or some kind of an educational program with the local community, because Medellin is a fairly regionalist type of city. There's not much interest in what's what's outside, or the foreign artists. But when the local community has a chance to participate, then they're very interested and active, and it works better for everybody. So we gradually came to the conclusion that through sort of an informal pedagogical program, we could have a larger impact in the arts community and the community in general. So we started doing conventional but non-conventional workshops in the sense that the artist practices who we chose for the residencies were always artists who had practices that were a little bit different than the artist practices that we encountered in the city itself. So as a result of those workshops and the social conditions at the time in 2012, which were reflected in the assassinations and threats to the local community rappers, the socially based rappers, the Secretary of Culture invited us to do a project with the children in the city to try to use art as a way to create social consciousness. So we accepted the challenge and we started to do this program with the children, which really was a turning point in our organization in terms of our understanding of what kind of impact we could have within the community itself. We worked with artists as the teachers or the workshop directors in the workshops with the children, and we gradually started to evolve our own methodology based on other let's say critical pedagogical practices like Paulo Freire and others. Between the years of 2013 and 2020, we really started to focus more on our the programs itself, and to identify the areas that we were interested in, which are the research, critical pedagogy, and artistic practice. And then the residencies sort of permeated all of those kinds of practices. We looked for artists whose practices were relating to pedagogy, or we were looking for artists and others, not just artists, but academics and researchers to participate in the residency program in order to deepen our understanding and their understanding of the local context. We continued for a while until last year, this project. It's a local artist residency project. And we gave public talks and exhibitions, and we continued with our pedagogical program. And over the past 8 or 9 years, we've included over 4,000 children and adolescents in the program that we have developed. And I want to focus on one project in particular with respect to solidarity and social justice. It's a project that we started in 2017, and it's a project in which we worked with ex-combatants of the FARC in various ways. They were based on residencies. The first one was a project that we did with the artist Ivo Eichenbaum in 2017.
You have 2 minutes left.
Okay, I'll run this a little bit more quickly. And Ivo wanted to do a documentary project about countries in post-conflict. So he worked with John Martinez, the young man on the left, who was an ex-combatant from the FARC, and they developed a narrative of the last march of the FARC when they returned their weapons. We did a seminar related to an exhibition, and then we did another project with another group of ex-combatants in what they call the ETCR, which is a reintegration camp they're scattered around Colombia, and the FARC normally were in the conflict in those areas, and so they felt an affinity with the community in those areas. And so we invited the French artist on the left, Amélie Cabosel, and the American artist Erica Thomas and her partner Roger Pete to work on the right is Erica, and we'll see Roger in a minute, to work with the FARC communications team to try to help them refine their skills with respect to silk screen printing, graphic design, and message refinement. And so they worked with them on creating these kinds of projects. And this kind of gives us an idea to a certain extent of how we've been trying to integrate artistic residencies into the work with the community. We've not only worked with the ex-combatants of the FARC, but we've also worked with the LGBTE community here. And we're working now on projects involving the Venezuelan community, the immigrant community, who we find a lot in Medellin, Colombia, as a result of the problems that they're having in Venezuela. And one of the things that I wanted to mention with respect to the questions that were raised for us to grapple with was the idea of radical experimentation. The radical experimentation for us, we began to think about that in when we started working with the children, and particularly when we started working with communities that were really facing extremely difficult issues just with respect to their own survival and the opportunities for making a living, the opportunities for doing just dealing with their day-to-day needs. And so we began to really to think about the difference between an artistic practice, which sometimes has the luxury of existing in this world of exhibitions and creating symbolic works, and what we're trying to do, and one of the struggles that we were dealing with and still deal with to a certain extent, is how to reconcile those symbolic actions with the real needs of the people that are trying to just make a living day to day. And in this period of the pandemic, we see this more and more, that the people that have no other options are the ones that are going out into the street and basically risking their lives and others just because they have no other option. So I'll leave it at that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony. Yes, we need to rethink radical experimentation, specifically in these very strange and difficult times for many of our communities. So we'll keep that in mind for the last part of the discussion. Now we would like to ask Dr. Jeffreen Hayes to present.
Okay. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. I'm really excited to learn about what everyone's doing in different parts of the world, and also to share a little bit about Three Walls. So I'm the executive director of Three Walls. Three Walls is a Chicago-based nonprofit. It was founded in 2003, and it was founded to support artists who are in Chicago, really focusing on artists who were experimental. Their work was not necessarily made for the market. It was also founded to give emerging artists their first solo exhibition. And so we know when you graduate from school, it's really difficult to get a solo show. You might get a number of group shows. So a lot of artists in the city, their first exhibition was at Three Walls. Three Walls also had an international residency program. And so bringing in international artists to help contribute and build an artist community here in Chicago. And over time, the organization has evolved to do different kinds of things, from organizing conferences to publications to kind of rethinking what a residency program could be. So it's an organization that is always evolving and responding to artist needs and the moment. I've been the executive director since fall of 2015, and this marked a very important signal shift for the organization. Chicago is a quite diverse city, and diverse in terms of race, ethnicities, cultures, as well as artistic and creative practices. And the history of the organization before I was hired, it was an organization that served predominantly white artists in a city that is actually a majority city people of color. And this isn't any different from what we see of the larger art world. And when you think about art schools, particularly in the United States, many of the artists that we supported also were graduates of the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And so understanding that those demographics, most of the students are predominantly white. And so the organization began to really grapple with the fact that it was not serving a large portion of our community, artists of color, or as we've termed kind of alongside philanthropy, Alana artists. So Alana meaning African, Latinx, Asian, Arab, and Native American descent or identified. And so the board decided it was really time for the organization to really begin to serve the community at large. And so here I am 5 years later. And so I give you a little bit of that background to share kind of who we are today and how we've evolved to Three Walls today. So Three Walls now is an evolving Black-led nonprofit organization that unapologetically celebrates Blackness, intersectionality, and exists through Black feminist practices. Three Walls fosters contemporary art practices that respond to lived experiences, encouraging connections beyond art. We center Alana, African, Latinx, Arab, Asian, and Native American artists, creatives, and collaborative projects, especially those which are best presented outside of traditional art spaces. And that language kind of alongside our mission is really important to kind of to get real clarity about who we are today as an organization and the work that we do. And being in a city like Chicago with its history of segregation that still very much exists along neighborhood lines, transportation lines, housing, it was really important for our organization to begin to respond, not just to our history, but the possibilities of what does it mean to support artists who don't typically get the same level of support that other artists get. What does it mean then to focus our attention really on supporting Chicago artists and not try to, in this moment, be like everyone else in wanting kind of the validation through international artists or celebrity artists or art stars? How do we support artists who are already doing what they do in their community? And so over the past 5 years, we have evolved our programs, and we do not do exhibitions anymore in our space. We used to be traditional bricks and mortar gallery. We now do exhibitions and installations in Chicago neighborhoods, in public spaces that are not art spaces. And that's really important to get at the fact that a lot of folks are not welcomed, they are not comfortable in traditional art spaces. So how do we bridge the gap between artists and communities so that they're actually seen as one? And so with that particular program, before we even get to presenting installations and exhibitions in the neighborhoods, we actually support artists who are already living in those neighborhoods by giving them research support. So the program that we've developed is called Rad Lab and Outside the Walls, and it's a 2-year fellowship where the first year we support the artists researching an idea that is related to their lived experience in that particular neighborhood. It addresses racial justice issues that aren't always so clear from the outset, but they're addressing these issues through their artistic practice. So we give them funding as well as curatorial support to research this idea. What are the issues? How are you using your practice to do that? And during that year, we do require the artists to engage their neighborhood. And so the research takes place in their neighborhood. They engage their neighborhood community members through 4 public engagements. And this is meant to, one, kind of pull the curtain back from artistic practice to help artists and neighbors or community members kind of really get to know each other and actually talk through the issue and kind of come up with different solutions or ideas to solve that really pressing issue.
You have 2 minutes left.
Great. And so over that year, there's this community building that goes a little bit deeper than even sometimes the artists even recognize. And then the following year, depending on how the research project evolves, the following year is the outside the walls. And that's when the research is then presented as an installation. And so I love the questions that we were presented because there's so much richness, and I've been thinking about it, about the question around struggle. And I want to not talk about it in terms of oppression or white supremacy, but really to center the challenge of getting artists to really imagine outside of white supremacy and traditional structures of the art system. That's a real struggle when you've only seen that as the path, right? We're told that you have to do the exhibition, you have to do, you have to make these objects, you have to connect with this kind of curator to validate your work. And so I think for us, that's one of the biggest struggles. How do we get artists to just truly believe in their own process and practice?
Thank you, Jeffreen. Yes, and it is very important to rethink that change is necessary. It is constant. It is a constant that we need to seek. And also, how do we build these communities? Because it's not only the artistic community, it's at large, and frequently residency programs are at that intersection where sustainability is always a question. How do we not compromise ethically our commitment to our communities that they might not demand immediately, but we know it is a need? And then how do we negotiate that with the reality of finances, of funding bodies, of grants, of our own income and how it's generated? So yes, thank you for bringing those questions back into the forefront. Now we want to ask Mami KATSUYA to present.
Hi, I'm Mami KATSUYA, Program Director of Kyoto Art Center from Japan. So first of all, I'd like to thank Francesco and Nail and the KATSUYA Foundation for this great opportunity. I would like to start to introduce Kyoto Art Center's background and the current activities first. And I want to share the slide. So Kyoto Art Center is founded by Kyoto City government in 2000, and it's used former elementary school building. And I think this building itself affects our activities a lot. So here's the oldest photo we have. It's taken in 1869. So this is the start of the history of the elementary school. And the school is closed in 1993. It had more than 100 years history, but it's closed 1993 because the number of the children decreased in downtown in Kyoto in this era. So the school finished, but the building remains, and the community people and the city government discussed how we use the buildings in the community. After the long discussion of those conversations, they finally ended up using the building as an art center. So this is how we start. And this is another photo of the old one. And this is the the Japanese style hall in Kyoto Center, which is there. Now it's like this. This is one of the rooms we have in Kyoto Center, and we use this room right now is something like this. So the exhibitions we have is always kind of like intervene the history of the building. So this is kind of uniqueness of our activities. Our mission is we have 3 missions, and one is to be a resource hub for artists, and the second is to encourage communications between artists and citizens, or among artists, and the third one is to cultivate young artists, means like to support young artists in their activities. We have any kinds of young disciplines. So to achieve those missions, we have several programs such as traditional arts stage performance program, or contemporary performing arts program, or visual arts program. And also the volunteer staff, management of volunteer staff is one of the important programs for us, because we have more than 500 volunteer staff in Kyoto Center. So we literally organize together with communities to have an exhibitions or any artistic activities happening in Kyoto Center. We also have an artist in studio program, which is to provide studios for local artists. And also we have, of course, artist in residence program, which is to offer the maximum 3 months opportunities to stay in Kyoto and work in Kyoto. So in the recent years, we have focused on exploring network around the world. And our interest is more focused on Asia regions, or in these few years, we are trying to expand our networks to Latin regions. So this means we are trying to connect directly from Asia to Asia connections, or Asia to other regions, not transiting in European countries or the United States, as a meaning of the mainstream of art world it used to be. And also we are organizing a domestic Japanese residency network called ARJ. This is an online database of artist in residence program in Japan. We so far 57 residencies registered in this network. So we are trying to connect each other, not only to international, but also within Japan. Of course, we have a diverse culture history in Japan. So I think we should connect each other more and more, and brings artist mobilities a lot. So in terms of the theme of this panel, I'm not responding directly, but what I'm struggling right now is, of course, about COVID-19 pandemic. This brought residency field severe damages, and but also I found that even though we are physically isolated, network is still very active. This symposium is a good example, for instance. So this is greatest hope what I found during the pandemic. So I think now I'm trying to how we can like activate the network we have developed. And so this is kind of what I'm thinking, and I'm struggling right now. And also, I think like residency is a platform we can meet artists as a human being. So like artist is always apart from like their background or their career or their titles when they come into a different culture. So the equal relationship between artist and us is the always key for being a good residency for us. So this is connected the idea of the residencies should be a place for failure. Like the artist can experiment and they can sometimes fail. So we should keep like those kind of spaces for failure, or the space for communication is also important key for us. So yeah, this is so far from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mami. It's very interesting to see how all of our programs intersect in terms of the educational mission, whether the building, whether the mission in itself, and also how programs intentionally or inevitably reflect the history of our communities. So yes, one of the important questions that Mami is bringing up is, this is a shift in the paradigm of the world. Doesn't mean it's going to be better. I agree with Tony. It's not being cynical. It's also facing the challenges as they are being presented. So the question here is also, what are we going to do next? And our responsibility with our communities is also at the forefront of our mission. Thank you, Mami. So now we want to ask Liudmyla NYCHAI to present next.
Hello, everyone. I'm very glad to meet of all of us, because it's very interesting thing when Francisco invited me to take part in this symposium. It was very hard for me because I very long time work with my international partner, but I always write a letter, but not not so easy to speak. And I try to explain about mission and about my residency and about some a little bit about context of Ukraine, because um, we work with middle politics, middle art, and civil society.
Mhm.
And if it's normal, I read a little bit, please. I'm co-founder and project coordinator of NGO, Congress of Culture Activists, and we appear after last revolution in Ukraine. Last, because all my partner love what in Ukraine every 10 years we must do some revolution. Yes, and last revolution was revolution of dignity, and I choose this panel because it's very important now in other mission, other NGOs and NGO and my project Nazar Voitovich Art Residency. My NGO, it's many people who consist from people from different professionals in the field of culture and art, united by common desire and interest in the development of civil society and promotion of sustainable development through activism in the cultural field. We are constantly learning and sharing knowledge and tools to achieve other goals. We support and cooperate for the sake of changes we would like to see around us. We have a slogan, very famous from Gandhi, yes, with a change. It's we start to use this slogan after last revolution. we work for the establishment and democratic universal values and aesthetic tolerance as a guarantee of the development of national and world culture. We practice and distribute the ideas of sustainable development for the development of civil society in Ukraine. The Congress of Culture Activists develops a network of culture activism and contributes the achievement to goal through implementation of interdisciplinary project in cooperation with regional initiative groups and international the same NGOs who have the same mission. We create a condition for intensify positive change in the culture field. One of the most important area of work is the development and support art mobility and art residency for culture diplomacy and develop career of youth artists, emerging artists. I have been studied the practices and art residency in the world for a long time, and my project is laboratory um, mm, for experiment for different models of residency and try to find some best model for Ukrainian context, because we can't put some experience for new context without change it. Nazar Voitovich, it's a youngest victim of the political crime what happened during the Revolution of Dignity in Ukraine, and he studied and wanted to be artist, and we decided to create this project to support youth artists and develop a new unique way to commemoration, because in Ukraine we have a tradition to um, commemoration only through the monument and crying. We try to show what we can to together commemoration with revolution as a not place, not some thing. It's a process, and we must remember what we what can happen if you choose wrong government. We must always think about this. Nazar Art Residency is art and educational center with studios, lounge rooms, and exhibitions place situated in the rural territory in the West Ukraine in a small village. In this village live 300 people. It's a very small, very small village. The aim of the art residency is to make precedent of a successful community development project in Ukraine, of the art exchange program, and develop the model of a similar project implementation in the state culture policy. We work with Ministry of Culture a few years, and we have a new strategy for development of culture in Ukraine, and we have a new institution. It's a state foundation, and after a period with foundation, we all culture sector in Ukraine start um, can to take money for project, and before it was only for government institution. Now we can use people who have a private institution or NGOs. A little bit about why we do this. Our art residency is a center of our activity, because we understand what few reasons. Yes, it's understand what culture is matter, because it's very soft tool for the change, and we now have a very not very open people and open society to change, and we try to use this instrument as a good tool, with tool for the change. We one of the largest country of the European continent, but we outsider in information field. We third world country, and it means what priority the economy, other democracy values. We have a very high level of corruption, and people, it's not hidden, and people, all people know about it, and 50% um, after I know about it, I accept acceptance. It's acceptance. My I understand it's normal, yes, and we try to explain in other projects what people it's a power, what people is a power, and we have mm, now we have country other country now it's ruled by media people, comedians and PR people. I think we must think about context why we do now other project, and why this panel for us very important. Before Ukraine became relatively independent 29 years ago, but still stay under influence of Russia. Before that 50 years, we was a part of Soviet Union, in which other country got a modern geographical borders, but within the borders of Union, we was isolated from the world. We were behind the Iron Curtain. Uh, Prior to that, the country was ruled by different empires. It's Russian on the east, and Polish and Austro-Hungarian in the west.
You have 2 minutes left.
Okay, I think we have the maybe a few words about other residency. Uh, in my project, we try to um, we go to a small village where the people have the same problem where we had in a global project problem in Ukraine. Yes, it's a small village is isolated, and when we come to this village, the first what we have the result. It's asphalt pavement of the road, because it's a first time the government, local government, decide to do this, because international institution can has appeared in the village. The house of this in this place given to us for free by local businessmen. Local men help to make repairs. We have partners with the local public and private organization. And the crowdfunding platform, we raised the first funds for workshop equipment. Our activity in the village, it's very interesting, because people wait us every summer, because we work now only in the summer. Uh, but we always a priori very good people who come in this village. We always come and bring foreigners artists, and people can meet and speak with somebody from another country. After we help to get rid isolation and inferiority, because people in a small village don't believe what somebody interested with place. And we discuss social challenges. We develop critical thinking, because people don't believe what somebody small people can influence for the government, and it's very important to talk about and show with some examples. And I try to show small presentation. To show it's a place, it's a room where we meet with the local people and people who come for artist talk and open the program. We had a free program through one summer. We come to the local college and talk about different interesting practice of art residency, mobility, and civil society project. We invite local children for workshops, creative presentation for local children, foreign artists. We work with different new instrument. We had a few different special studios, and we try to show some very experience who they never to do without us. It possibility to create. It's yoga. It's performing art. We many times through a program we talk about the meaning of other programs. We meet with a local context, and we meet with different ages of artists, local artists who live around other projects. And thank you.
Yes, thank you, Liudmyla. And thank you for bringing all these important questions into the conversation. One of the challenges that we have faced through the symposium is that language is a barrier. It has become the limitation in which we cannot communicate. We try to communicate, but there are many nuances in our own languages that cannot be translated to other languages. So it's always a challenge. However, the similarities among regions, for instance, in Mexico or in Latin America, in many places, corruption is also very well known. And I think corruption is the result of a process of survival that has continuously happened since the conquest 500 years ago and reimagined itself. And also, thank you for reminding us that commemoration is a form of knowledge. Remembering is a form of knowledge that helps us survive. And of course, that is connected to the constant questions that we have been thinking about: change as a necessity, the possibility of residencies as a space for experimentation. Thank you, Liudmyla. So now we want to ask Shih Yun Yeo to present.
Hi everyone, I'm really happy to be here and thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion. I have quite a lot of slides to show, so I think I will not waste any time. I will dive right in. Yeah, Instinc was established in 2004 and I'm the founder and the artistic director of Instinc, and our main mission is to foster community through experimental collaborations, and the main focus is always art and the artists, and we hope that we can create an environment that art and artists will always inspire us and our community. So we are artist-run institution based in Singapore, and we have exhibitions and artist talk and workshops. So we have a 10-year long residency program from 2009 to 2019. And as I said, the main kind of driving force is collaborations, cultural exchange, and friendship. So from 2019 April, we stopped our residency program and we have no physical space, but we are more focused on connecting with artists. So we have formed great relationship with Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Japan through the years. And when we had the residency program, Instinc 6 artists whose work is unique and demonstrate clear ideas and fresh artistic approach, and is relevant to contemporary art today. And we are independent. We have no local government funding, and I think one of the things to highlight is a lot of residency programs, they have you have to write a proposal, but for our residency program, you can just apply with your portfolio and you can be inspired by what Singapore offers, and you don't have to write a proposal in advance. So through the 10 years, we have hosted more than 75 artists from different countries, and we have worked with the following organizations. And to talk about a bit about sustainability, artists kind of must get funding from their own city so that we would reduce a lot of paperwork from our side. And we also work with organizations like Asia, New Zealand, so that regular artists can arrive to Instinc every year. And we had 3 artists at every one point in time. So besides doing residency program, we also rent our space to other functions like product launch and art exhibitions. We do not have any full-time staff, so we rely on residency coordinator, interns, and etc. So I believe in the power of collaboration, and competition makes you faster, but collaboration makes you better. And what is the kind of radical experimentation that we did in Instinc is I introduced a collaborative residency called Interact Air in 2015, and I paired up local artists with an international artist. So these are the kind of artists that you can see. So from Korea, we have, this is the exhibition, and then we have Australia, and then we have Canada and India. So now you can see, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I was talking about the residency. So we have paired up with Singapore artists and the overseas artists that apply. So we also have exhibitions from like Hong Kong artists, and they will have artist talks and workshops. And then because after we know them, it led to another exhibition. They came in 2016, so 2 years later, it led to another exhibition where we have a show with 5 Singapore and 5 Hong Kong artists. And we also did a collaboration with Yokobo Art Space in Tokyo. So there will be 4 artists from Singapore going to Tokyo for the residency for a month each, 4 times. And then we do the exchange. And then in the end, we have a kind of a cumulative show in Singapore in the Japan Creative Center. And we celebrated our 10th anniversary with a program called the Instinc 10, the celebrating a decade of art and collaboration. So over the years, we worked with many artists who came to Instinc for a residency program. And then we kind of have an open call and invited 5 overseas artists and 5 local artists, and we pair them up to do collaboration during kind of like a period of 10 days. And then you will see like I want to share a short video of this collaboration. Can you all see the video now?
Yes, we can.
I'm Justin Lee, I'm from Singapore.
I'm Marva Scayo from Spain. Justin and me, from the very beginning, we tried to talk, to know each other, to exchange ideas and concepts before start to paint.
And we also did a bit of the cultural exchange. So Elba, she actually contributed some of the images back from Spain, and then I rework on it on computers, and then before we start onto the painting. And the whole idea is about our journey, that the way we travel, the way we see the things that inspired us.
So all these artists that you see here are the whole gang, all the 10 artists, and In this celebration, the Instinc 10, we also work with a brand, Volvo, and then we painted the Volvo cars. Yeah, so these are the two cars that were painted and exhibited outside the Affordable Art Fair. So in exchange for this collaboration, the Volvo actually paid for the booth at the art fair. And we also, this exhibition is actually the last exhibition of Instinc. And we, after April of 2019, we didn't have a space anymore. Which brings us to, so we are having a lot of exhibitions now that we don't have any residency program. So it's about connecting with other artists and having exhibitions in Singapore and other countries.
For this show devoted, Instinc Gallery and artist curator Shih brought together 9 artists to work in a single space over the span of 7 days. During these 7 days, the whole exhibition changes at every moment. Because each artist brings in their own medium, their own ideas, their own personalities, to answer the single question, how do we get along with each other? How do we actually create space for us to relate with each other? And this show, we feel, kind of responds to our current times as well, where we live in a crowded city, where we actually have very loud opinions. So, in these very complex, dynamic times, how do we still kind of be open to actually being influenced by each other? What is the magic that connects us? Good or bad? Harmonious or uncomfortable? That's what Devoted's about.
So it was lucky that this was it happened in January before the COVID happened. So we had a lot of people. So yeah, we were quite kind of blessed. And then because of this COVID, we also organized a online artsy exhibition where we feature 14 artists from different countries. Kind of because we were all staying at home, so we were all creating works at home, and this exhibition kind of show the works done during the 14 days. And kind of the opening night, because we can't, have people, so we did a Zoom with all the 14 artists for the opening night of this exhibition. And also in order to kind of engage, continue the engagement, not just the online show, but we also, what we did was we asked every artist to do a 7 days real life challenge. So different countries, every artist from each city, they will post, what they have done and the situation in their own city for 7 days. And some art projects for social justice in Singapore is, I would like to share with you, although this is not an Instinc project, it is another kind of collective called Post Museum. They are one of the independent cultural social space in Singapore, which aims to encourage and support a thinking and proactive community. So they also had a kind of a physical space from 2007 to 2011 in Little India. And they also had residency program, artist studios, but also because it's very difficult to sustain, a physical space because of the rental overhead. So they also stopped. So now they are actually nomadic. And I would like to share some of the projects they have. This really free market series where they not just in Singapore, but they're invited to do this in other countries like Fukuoka, Tokyo, London, and people from not just artists, anyone who can come and give away things, not exchange, but you can freely take anything and donate anything in this series. And they also
have 2 minutes left.
Okay, and they also had this Phuket Brown project where in Singapore, because the space is so rare and so limited, and this used to be a cemetery and that housed many Chinese over I think about 5,000 Chinese bodies, and because Singapore the government needs to use the land to develop a highway. So this project was actually started because of this reason, and not just artists, but many people also came to join in, like the historian and all. And there's also another project called Awaken the Dragon, that they were some old kilns for ceramics, but it's no longer used, and so they use this for projects, workshops, and then to revive this kiln again. So to touch a little bit on dignity, recently we had this article on our Singapore Straits Times, Sunday Times, and they interviewed 1,000 respondents, and actually they did a survey, and actually the artists came out to be 71%. They agree that artists is the top 5 non-essential jobs. So what is the struggles of artists, and the future of pandemic? So we, solidarity, what I feel about is we as artists have to stick together and continue supporting each other. There'll be more collaborations and more collectives-led exhibitions, and technology will be used more and more. And I think artists will also do a lot of works regarding art and technology, and we can also think about internet less of a space but more like a medium, and we have to think outside the box, not just create art inside galleries and museums, but on the street and other spaces. And as we have less and less, we have more and more funding from the government, which means that we might be under more scrutiny and more censorship. And overall, I think the arts funding will be much lower, as art is usually undervalued. And I think artists, curators, and all of us will need to adopt a more flexible working mode. And I think the need for human interactions, connection, like what we are doing now is valued more than ever. And physical exhibitions cannot be replaced by VR online exhibitions. And as Francis Morris, director of Tate Modern, say, having a real conversation with real people is hugely exciting. And we have to know, we have to be still and know our worth. We have to be adaptable and relevant, and we have to have patience and resilience, and we will survive. And creativity was with us in the caves and is in every bone in our body. So virus can't kill art. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Shih, for
Yeah.
this very powerful presentation, and for reminding us of the power of collaboration and how it makes us better. This is something that we've been thinking about through the process of putting together the symposium. How do we think of a new topography where we are actually now connected? That, through history, it was not necessarily natural, quote unquote. Also to remind us of the challenges that we face in terms of sustainability, because it's always knocking at our door. How are we going to continue with a space or even without a space? What is the future for residencies? And also how residencies are spaces where we interact, where we encounter. And therefore, there are many relevant questions that connect with our communities. Specifically, the project Really, Really Free Market is a very interesting one to remind us of how local knowledge has been challenging capitalism, money, traditional transactions, to rethink how we can have a better relationship with each other. And also to remind us of how we need to be adaptable and flexible. This is what is going to allow us, in collaboration with each other, to survive. So thank you for your presentation. So now I want to introduce a few questions that are very relevant to the whole discussion and open it for you guys to participate. And the first one that I want to introduce, it has to do with sustainability and local knowledge. So what kind of struggles are our organizations facing? And what ways of knowing, quote unquote, as Boaventura de Silva is phrasing it, we have produced as a result. So what are the kinds of struggles that we are facing, and what are the ways of knowing that each one of our programs have produced in reaction or as a consequence or as a possibility for survival? And of course, this is a difficult question because it is something that we have to constantly ask ourselves. What are the challenges that we have faced? And what are the lessons that came out of those challenges that allow us to continue? How do we reconnect with our communities? And specifically, all of our programs have been connected to different communities by creating a space of knowledge. Each one of us presented projects where we engage with our different communities and different demographics and different ages, the different distribution of populations within our communities through knowledge. So in that sense, one of our assets that we need to think about, and whenever we think about resistance, has to do with education.
Francisco, I'll jump in. In our particular case, as we began to evaluate our role in the community as an art space, one of the things that paradoxically happened was that we actually began to attract larger audiences in our public talks and things like that as we began to engage more with the community. But paradoxically, also, the art community in Medellin began to be less of our audience than the academic community and the other community organizers and activists and educators in the community. So as a result of that, we also found that there was more funding available for the projects that we did. So in a way, as we moved in this particular context, as we moved away from art as the main focus and toward the community as the focus, involving artists as educators and creators, our sustainability became stronger. Our possibilities for sustainability became greater. And so for us, it was an interesting kind of experience to see how that kind of shift in focus from just working with the arts community and supporting the arts community to engaging the arts community in community work with the community itself actually helped us in our sustainability efforts. So just to put that on the table.
Thank you, Tony. And yes, because a lot of these questions when we think about sustainability is how do we not compromise our future? And what does that even mean in relationship to our communities? Because in many of the projects that we encounter, that we produce, we are always facing the reality of not creating too high expectations for the communities that we serve. And in that sense, I want to ask Dr. Jeffreen Hayes if she can jump in with her experience with her community.
Sure. So this is a really complicated question because there are many struggles, right? And so for Three Walls, and thinking about local knowledge and community and artists, the biggest struggle probably not necessarily internally, but externally. So when we're talking about board members, because we do have a board structure, donors and funders, there's this assumption that they know better than the artists who are actually in these communities. And so, and with that, kind of presenting solutions, right? When we know internally that that art and culture already exist within these communities that may not fit the structure of a gallery or a museum, and that the artists who are also there, while they may be in the community, they may not be of the community. And so they're also learning about their community. And so the struggle between also artists who have been, who've gone to art school, and I don't think art school is a bad thing, but it tends to kind of color the way you think about art and community and what art actually is. And so that's been also a little bit of a struggle, but also what we know is that it already exists. There are different ways to think about art. And as an organization, responding to the different ways that artists create art and participate in art um, has actually helped us in terms of our sustainability because we're responding to the human aspect. And again, I'm a curator, I work with objects, but I also very much center, and what I appreciate in this conversation is centering the artist as a human being, right? And so we have moved from that to really thinking holistically about the artist and them being part of, as well as in a community who are also facing the same struggles and issues. And so we've been able to make that argument in terms of um, funding, because funding obviously is really important to this work, to say, hey, we're actually not privileging the object, but we're privileging the individual and the knowledge that they are producing, the knowledge that they already know, and helping to be that bridge between what the knowledge that already exists within that community. And we've so far, I mean, we're 5 years into this new way of being. We've been fortunate over the past year to really be able to not necessarily make that argument, but to have a foundation, see that work from afar and really invest in it and invest in the human aspect of artists. And so it's been slow in terms of the funding piece, but we have been able to really also connect with those in our community that value humanity.
Yes, thank you. And this is very valuable to understand how also the process of change is necessary for our programs, how we envision even our mission when we created our programs or when we established or when we started working in our programs has to evolve and changes. And I want to ask Mami KATSUYA about her program because it is also very interesting to think about the local knowledge and specifically the residencies that they have that are rooted in local knowledge, in traditional knowledge in that sense, but also with the volunteer program that your Kyoto Art Center has. 500 volunteers is it's a lot of human it's a lot of human resources in that sense. So how do you put that together? How does that um, has created lessons for everyone, including the artists who go to your residency?
Um, Yeah, because Kyoto Art Center is public sector, no, 100% funded by the tax. I mean, so like those 500 volunteers are the like founders in a sense. So they are kind of like responsibility or the right to engage in our program. So so we like as a coordinator or we encourage the artist engaged or communicate with the those volunteer staff frequently. So like we set kind of like the meeting like once a month before the exhibition starts, so that the citizens or community people communicate directly with the artist, or like and the artists are sometimes making like a very radical expression or experimental expression, and that it's very difficult to understand or like capture the sense of the concept. So we try to like have an opportunity to communicate or exchange dialogue with the volunteer staff or community people to artists before they engaged in our activities. So this is how we always do. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. And thinking of dialogue, because it is necessary to establish this reciprocity with our communities. I want to connect these thoughts with Liudmyla's experience, and specifically how she mentioned remembering this process of commemoration as a possibility of uh, as knowledge and as a possibility for change. And how do you connect that with the community when you have these different workshops and this different programming that taps into different communities? How do you think of memory and remembering as knowledge that can continue change?
Hear me?
Mhm.
I want to talk about my um, challenges in this community there. We had project because we open with art residency in the village there the born Nazar Voitovich, but inside in this community we find few problems, and we always when come some artists come to my residency they must to find a context and some very important thing for the art mm, consciousness. And my residency, Alexandra Pavlovska, find few women who remember the process of mm, how would name it? It's a forcibility relocated from Poland. Always a village before was a village in Poland, but when after Second World War, Soviet Union start to build a new border, or then people who live in Poland but was Ukrainian, they was put in some transport or maybe by walk. They must go to Ukrainian territory, and people from Ukraine who was a Polish must go to Poland. And in the Soviet time, it was a silent topic. And people who are very old now, the last woman died last year. She very afraid to talk about this, and we understand what people live with in this situation all their life and never to talk about it. And when she start to interview some of the friends, tell for she sorry, don't talk about it because you will be beaten. It's very old woman. It's people who live 29 years in independent country, but in a small village, this woman don't understand what all and we prepare the very big project. We take part in. International Photo Art Week, and we show this project in German, and we prepare the newspaper with interview and photo with village and with woman. And after that, all citizens, all people who live in this territory understand what it's not secret. It's problem, and we can't talk about it. And I think it's a very good example for um, talk about contemporary time, because we have the same different politics, corruption, scams, and we must talk about this. We can do something only when we talk about, not silent. It's first big project what we do it 2 years. We Alexandra come 2 times because first time she must meet with these women, but next time start to talk about it. It was very interesting, and um, it's a most brightly example from my experience.
Thank you, thank you. And yes, interviews and this process of encountering can establish new forms of collaboration. And in that sense, I also want to connect with Shiyun's perspective on the subject, how the power of collaborations makes us better. What are the lessons that you've learned and your program has established through the process of collaboration that has allowed your program to continue and that make the community in many ways better?
You know, as two individuals who haven't met each other with so much differences, you know, like so it's just like for example, we had the Instinc 10 where we had 5 Singapore artists to collaborate with 5 overseas artists, and we select the artists based on like randomness. So we didn't really kind of choose who we want to partner with, but we kind of put all the names in a box and then we just draw the name out. So coincidentally, an American was actually partnered with a Chinese artist to do this collaboration. First, there will be a, because he doesn't speak the artist from China, although he had been staying in Singapore for I think 6 to 8 years. But because many people in Singapore, we speak Chinese and English. English is our first language, but most of the 70% are Chinese, so he could survive very easily, you know, without learning how to speak English. So when we communicate with him, I also speak Chinese to him. So when he is paired with this artist from New York, so it's really like a two-person who can't really communicate, but then they communicate through the art making, you know, through the paint, through using the tools. And I feel that it's, you know, when you look back, like now with the COVID and with the so bad relationship between US and China, right? You know, they are all blaming each other. But then when you look back in 2014, 6 years ago, that American can collaborate with this Chinese artist, and you know, and beautiful paintings were formed and beautiful friendship were formed. You know, so we can learn from this that, you know, like, you know, although we have differences, and you know, each of them had a lot of differences, you know, in terms of language, in terms of personal style, artistic style, you know, in terms of choice of colors, like, you know, these are just like kind of the major differences. But in the end, you know, art, I feel that it's like, you know, like music is universal, and it's like, you know, like it will, if you make it, you know, this collaboration and the collaboration work, it really, you know, is like magical. That's what I feel.
Yes. Thank you. And in that sense, I want to introduce another important question that we have been thinking about since the beginning of the symposium. And a lot of the panelists and also the keynote speakers have talked about the space, a residency space, as a space for failure, as Mami also was mentioning, as this possibility where we make mistakes. Um, However, it's always being in constant pull and push from the art world, because of course, by unloading a lot of infrastructure into residencies programs, for instance, museum rely on the production of residencies programs. So we're always in that constant negotiation. However, specifically in our program at Architopia, we think about the artistic practice as an open-ended question. And in that sense, we have learned, because art might not make it better, as we have been realizing art is always being organized by art history and filtered through museums, and the whole problem, the institutional problem that we know that has to change, and that recently, more than ever, voices are being raised to change that. However, artists do remain with questions, many questions, probably their whole lives. They might not be able to answer them. They might not be able to solve the problem, but they establish a very intimate relationship with those questions. And in that sense, I also think that residency programs, which is a field that in most recent years, people, scholars are looking at it to study what's happening sort of backstage, sort of behind the scenes, because we facilitate a lot of possibilities for artists, and then the artwork is created. So, what are the aspects that we can learn from each other? Because we also, when we have been able to encounter each one of you, we see that the struggle, of course, it's real, but also there are many lessons that probably we have not learned. I'm speaking about Architopia, that also connect with many of the struggles that we have regionally: the scarcity of funding, the reality of the ethical question in relation to our communities. However, we have learned many lessons, for instance, from working with smaller communities, moving our space from Oaxaca City into San Pablo, which is a tiny town, just like Liudmyla was describing, has been one of the biggest lessons, because we have learned how communities are more resilient than we are. They have more knowledge than we have, and they're even more generous because they're willing to teach us. They're willing to share that knowledge. So the question that I want to ask is, what have we learned locally that we could implement interculturally and also transnationally? Not necessarily internationally, because that speaks to the larger structures of how it has always been mediated by history, but thinking about these new topography, these new possibility of connecting who we are right now in completely different locations. What have we learned that we could share transnationally?
Paco, I'll begin again, because I have to leave in a little while anyway. But
Mhm.
but I think that one of the topic that Shinju brought up about collaboration, I think is a really interesting one, and the one that what you just mentioned, also with respect to the relationship with the community and how the community relates to people who come into their community, into the space, to learn and to try to contribute, is this idea of mutual support, and the idea of, instead of thinking about sustainability in economic terms, in these small communities, and with among the artistic community also, it becomes mutual support, and generosity becomes more of a capital, a valuable capital than an economic capital. And so this generosity of spirit, and the different forms that we can share our experiences, our knowledge, and be receptive to the processes that exist in in the communities that we enter into, I think is something that really needs to be explored on a global level. I mean, now we're all facing this kind of hyper capitalist system, but this pandemic is actually sort of showing us the cracks in the system, and the lack of the system's ability to support the poorest and most vulnerable members of the communities, and all over the world. It's not just in Latin America or Asia, or it's in the United States, and the places that have sort of traditionally been the sort of symbols of stability. We're seeing the cracks in those myths. But I think that one of the things, we're part of another network. It's called Arts Collaboratory, and one of the things that we've been looking at is all these alternatives of thinking about how we can rethink capitalism, or capital in and of itself, and to think about alternatives, ways of living and relating to one another. But I think on the small scale, we learn those lessons from the ways that people in small communities or closed communities begin to support one another, and the alternative, the ways that that sometimes the unorthodox ways and what seems to be really radical ways that they deal with issues such as sustainability is one, but also security. In some of our countries, security is a huge issue, and sometimes they result in illegal activities, but sometimes they just result in ways that the community deals with their own security and their own well-being. And those kinds of lessons are things that I think if we study them in an objective way, they could become valuable for us as an international community as well.
Yes, thank you, Tony. It is very true. We need to rethink how we even think about security, safety, because it is also part of our community's concerns, and it's not necessarily only in connection to the perception of the country in terms of security, but it's actually how these communities have survived. Absolutely. Yes. Who else would like to? Yes, go ahead, Liudmyla.
I have maybe it's very funny thing, but I think it's my story about how I invite artists from Italia, invite to the village, but I can't to go with her, and she go in the art residency and stay alone in this place. And you understand it's Ukraine, Italian. Come to village. She speak Italian and English, and she stay alone in the big house. It's for her. It's very afraid because different think around, maybe some light, some shadow, and she start to go to some shop and maybe some community. And when people start to want to talk with women, they find one woman who work in Italia, and find a translator for this. And Maria, she work with ethnic different sing song, and maybe some I don't know. It's not only about traditional thing. It's maybe for some local magic thing, some native magic thing, and she must record in the song and talk with women, and they find the translator. They find some company for Maria, and invite to the home, and they together live 1 week without me, without no administration. And I understand, but when I come and bring all people and give them, they understand, oh, maybe not today, I come another time, because it's usual thing. When they participate to make a decision, they feel what they very important. And I think it's not only in this village. I had a project in the east of Ukraine, and in all place, all people feel the same. If you're asked to make some decision, another people, they feel what they have the power. And it's very important thing, very small but very important, to develop the very responsibility community. Thank you.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Who else would? Yes, Shih.
Maybe I'll just like to kind of emphasize, like maybe in these times that, where, again, where we have less resources and kind of less funding, and a lot of artist-run spaces or art centers are all dependent on the state funding. I think we have to, increase and think more and be materials, maybe And I think another thing which is I think during this time that we really have to form like support groups, within our, like for example, I have a few artist groups that we always constantly in touch with, and we have like on the WhatsApp chat group. So I think in this time where we are alone and we can't travel and we can't do a lot of things together, with this kind of support, we can always like ask each other, how are you, and a line like that is actually very important. That we know that we are not alone, and we know that we have support of other artists. So I think, this is what I would like to share.
Yes, absolutely. It is very important and necessary to, and this is something that we have also seen in the process of the symposium. Many of the programs realize that they're not alone, because a lot of what we do seems to be isolated, and more than ever we feel the isolation. And this possibility of reconnecting and also being flexible, adaptable, and reaching to one another to collaborate. Yes, thank you, Shiyun. Who else would like to? Yes, Jeffreen.
So some of the things that we've learned through our process has been that the invitation matters. And what I mean by that is inviting the artist to be part of our process, and that process is always evolving and unfolding. And that within that, though, there's respect for that process. And so we absolutely encourage the artists to respect not only their process, but the process that exists within their community in terms of building relationships, in terms of how you engage with one another. And then we also very much encourage them to take risks, right? And to go back to the top of the question in terms of these spaces are spaces for failure, and how the art world doesn't necessarily reward that, right? And so what we've learned is we have to actually state it for some of the artists and say, it's actually okay that you fail. Take the risk. That's actually what we really want you to do. And then just overall, in terms of our program, there are two things. We've learned that folks really do want to be in community with each other, in whatever form that might take, in a way that is sometimes very different from other spaces. And so we absolutely lead with vulnerability. That's something very important to us. And when we lead with that, that encourages the artists to kind of also be vulnerable. And then that opens up a whole world of possibilities. And then lastly, we've learned through this process that neighborhoods or community members in neighborhoods really want art in their community, which is very universal in terms of this conversation. And that they don't necessarily, like Chicago is a community of neighborhoods, and folks don't like to leave their neighborhoods if they have the amenities. Some cannot leave their neighborhoods because of, systemic structures. And so when art is living and accessible and active in their communities, there's this joy that comes alive that doesn't always kind of exist in those spaces. And so what we've learned is to just kind of decentralize where art can be and actually have it exist within communities across the city.
Yes, absolutely. This idea of not conceding to the center, decentralizing, is key to what we are all doing. And I want to ask Mami KATSUYA if she wants to add something to the conversation.
Yes. I have a lot of opportunities to take international artists to local artists, especially like craftsmanship like Japanese craftsmanship or like a Japanese performing arts masters. So I think like we can learn a lot from them. For example, like for craftsmanship, like they live there and they get material from there and they make there, and like the product they make is used by the citizens there. So like their ecosystem is kind of like in the community, and it's like a sustainable. So I think we can I think like in this pandemic, like a lot of contemporary artists are like facing why the question is like why they're traveling, why we are traveling or why we are moving a lot. So I think we have to rethink like or the re-questioning like why we travel to think about like those like craftsmanship uh, yeah. And also I think a lot from like a mentorship from traditional arts performers. Like for example in Japan, like for traditional arts performers, they started to learn like in the age of like 3 years old, and they have like one masters for their lives. So they have like a lifetime mentorship relationship. So of course, like residencies are normally like a short time period, like 3 months or sometimes like a 1 month. But like we can think like why 3 months. So I think we have to like think like we can in even like in a residency we can develop like a longer relationship or longer mentorship maybe. So yeah, in this pandemic, I've kind of like thinking those ideas a little bit.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Mami. Absolutely, and one of the things that we will also tap into when we have the book presentation, Contemporary Artist Residencies, is a question that you just posed. Why travel? Why why travel now? And to me, it is in a sense a very important um, question to the future of residencies, because it is going to force us to rethink what we do in many ways. I see residencies as the future of the cultural sector in many ways, because we are in a very complicated space in between private and public. We're not fully private, but a lot of the processes that we have to deal with in joyful and also painful ways are have to do with intimacy and the privacy of our spaces. And then we're also in between public spaces, because we engage larger audiences. We try to engage them in educational processes so that it's more open, but it is in a sense impossible to not fall on the premises of how public space is organized, and that has to do with race, and that has to do with gender, and that has to do with class more than anything. So I see residencies as a very important key actor in deciding the future of culture in many ways, which is an open-ended questions that we are thinking about. And I think this panel in particular is making this open invitation to many residencies to take risks. And in many ways, as Audre Lorde mentioned, to embrace friction. Because in the process of encounter, friction, which is very painful because it moves us from the place where we were, but it also produces knowledge as we encounter, specifically when we embrace non-dominant differences. And to quote also Benedict Anderson, it is important to rethink the style in which we want to imagine our community. And I mean our community in terms of residencies. You know, this symposium is just a way of provoking. It's a way of reconnecting, a way of opening this invitation for all these different spaces that we all have, the ones that we are participating in the symposium, but also many others, to collaborate, to reimagine what is the potential that we have from the knowledge that we have locally produced, so that we can, in many ways set or put the bar higher in terms of how we encounter and our responsibility with our communities. We are running out of time. This has been an incredible panel, and I just want to ask you if you have anything to add to the conversation as a conclusion. Tony had to leave, but those of us who remain in the panel, if you want to add something as part of the conclusion. Okay, Liudmyla.
I think about why we want have to many mobility. Yes, why we go to another country, to another culture, to meet a different people. And few weeks ago, we opened the Zoom conference with my artist and people who want to think, do something or think something about virtual project, because the last thing what we do in other residencies was virtual exhibition. We open not art residency program, we open virtual exhibition, and we meet in the Zoom and think about if it COVID, it's what new we start learn, and people all talk what art residency we can't to change something else, because it's a place where they can to hear another people and contact. It's very important to create some new idea, because it's a study each other, and it's very important to make with opportunity to young people and for all people. I think it's very great opportunity to always be in the top of information, and solve all from the top, not eat only information what you can to saw in TV or maybe some internet. You more understand what you when you can a connection with different people. You start more openly. And when I invite foreign artists to Ukraine, I always understand what it's very safety. We have war on the east of Ukraine, but I invite all of you come to Ukraine, because we're very hospitality, and you must to um, to meet with Ukrainian as no tourist, as a friend. I invite all you come to Nazar Voitovich residency, or maybe to Kiev, and meet and have closer contact, and have a time to more deeply think and talk about art mobility at residency. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So with this in mind, and as Liudmyla has beautifully put it together, contact is necessary for new ideas. And it has been a wonderful privilege to share this panel with all of you. We have an open invitation that Nayeli, our programs coordinator, will talk about and explain, because it's an open invitation for all the programs to join as a possibility to collaborate in different ways.
Yeah, going back to this idea of collaboration and how we want to imagine our communities, we've been thinking in having a last session with all the programs or the programs that want to join us for, we call them, the session, it's called Tequio Lab. The tequio is a tradition that we have, especially in Oaxaca, and it's an exchange of resources. people contribute in their own communities by exchanging either services or, especially in the community where we are in San Pablo Etla, people has the responsibility with their own space, so their own environment. So people needs to go and if to clean the city, and they have different responsibilities. So we've been thinking in this idea because with all these new things that are happening, we need to find new ways of collaborating between each other, to find new ways of challenge the exchanges that probably are not going to work in the same way after coronavirus. So we would like to invite you. I will email you with more details by the end of this symposium with some ideas about how we can connect and start working all together after this pandemic.
Yes, thank you. And as we've been thinking, sustainability is the big question in terms of how we don't compromise our future. So and of course, we'll invite to join us. I want to thank you again for these incredible conversations and dialogues that we've had. It's been an honor and a pleasure. So thank you all.